Salamun Alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's stream. I hope that all of you are doing well and that have a wonderful weekend ahead of you. So, today we are going to be discussing the term Muslim or Al Muslim, as we also know it. So, in other words, what does the Quran mean when it employs this term? And how can we understand it and relate it to our lives today? So, first of all, I'm going to be focusing on a particular verse of the Quran, which is found in Surah Al-Fussilat, verse number 33. And in that verse, Allah tells us, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And there Allah asks the question, sort of like a rhetorical question, who then is better in speech than one who invites to God and works suitably? You can also translate that as works righteously, and who says, I am indeed of the Muslimin. So I have chosen not to translate this word as for now, but later on when I will repeat this verse, I will translate that word. But firstly, let us go through how the Quran utilizes this word as well as its derivatives. So the word or the term Muslim is derived from the triliteral roots sin, lam, and mim, from which we also get other words such as Muslim, as I just said, but we also get other words such as mustaslim. We get salam, we get sallama, musallama, and we get sallima. We also get asilm, we get asulam, we get assalamu, we get salim, we get taslim, we get aslama, and we get Islam. So all these words are basically derived from the three letters, and the basic meanings of these three letters is like, for example, to hand over something, to make peace, or to give into, to relinquish something over to somebody else, to surrender something over to somebody else, also to submit. So when you submit something or to hand in something, to cede something means to give up, to render something over, or to turn over something, or to yield. Basically, you're giving up again. So you can understand from these kinds of words where we are heading towards. To extend, such as, for example, when you want to extend a rope or you want to extend a greeting, it can also mean health, wellness, and wholesome. So all these different meanings are derived from the three letters sin, lam, and mim. And the Quran uses them very differently. And depending on the context or depending on the verse, you will be able to understand in what sense does the Quran mean these words. So they all don't mean the same thing, and so the person who is translating should be wary and careful to not render these terms the exact same way, because they are in fact different. So what of the word Muslim? The word Muslim is itself conjugated from the verb aslama, right? Aslama, from aslama we get Muslim, which in of itself, though it's a verb, itself is actually conjugated from salima, and salima means he or it became clean or free from its flaws, faults, and weaknesses, meaning that it became healthy, well, and sound, implying that it is found or it is in a state of safety, peacefulness, and harmony, and it has no troubles. So basically, something that is or becomes that in that state, you call it as salima. It has salima. It has basically reached that position of calmness, peace, tranquility, harmony, peacefulness, and such. Aslama, on the other hand, the verb itself, it means that someone who does the act of salima to somebody or something else, meaning that you are granting, or you are freeing, another, or another person, or you made that other person achieve salima. Okay? Or be able to acquire salima. So it's basically when you do the action in order for another individual to achieve the act of salima, or the state of salima, all right, of being healthy, well, and sound, then we would say that you are aslam, or you would say that aslamta, right? You have aslama, right? You have aslam, or aslamtu, right? I have aslam, I have done this thing, right? This thing of salima to somebody else or something else. Typically, not by subjecting them to one's own harmful behavior. So what that means is that you are uh, you are conscientiously deciding not to act on your own inclination to harm another person. So you can, so in that case, you are basically surrendering your own inclinations within. So hence why it can also mean to surrender. The word can mean also to surrender, because in this particular case, one is surrendering or giving up one's own inclinations. So those own inclinations that you might have of harming other people, those ones you are surrendering to their right of safe, or to their right of safety, wellness, and soundness. So basically, when you are doing that, you are Muslim. We call that Muslim, and it is typically it's not an action-based thing. Like, you don't do it, like act it out. It's actually a passive thing. It's a passive state. It's not an active state. If you are a Muslim, you are in a passive state of, of peacefulness, right? Of of surrendering. Basically, you are in an active. Sorry, you are in a passive state of surrendering, right? So if you are to look at the raw definition that we can gather from all these different wordings of what the word Muslim can mean, a Muslim is then a person who surrenders or gives up their own inclination to harm others or even themselves, right? They give up their own inclinations, those inclinations that we have of harming others. We give those up, okay? So it is sort of like a passive state of being. It's not an active state of being. When somebody is in that state and they decide to act, based on something within that state, that person becomes a mu'min, right? So it's sort of like a different understanding. And we can talk about that if there's anybody who has any questions about that. So to repeat again, a Muslim is one who surrenders or gives up their own inclinations to harm others or even themselves, i.e., they restrain their hands from harming others, right? So hence why we also have, for example, the hadith which says al-Muslim man salima al-Muslimun, right? Salima al-Muslimun min lisanihi wa yadihi, right? Al-Muslim man salima al-Muslimuna min lisanihi wa yadihi, meaning that a Muslim, or the Muslim, is one from whom other Muslims are safe from his tongue and his hands. So what this means is that other people who are in the state of passive, right? In that passive state of not harming others. Okay. So those people, they are safe from you as a Muslim. You understand? So the Muslim is the one who is who other passive people are also safe from. So they are not actively trying to harm you, basically. that is a Muslim. It's not an active state. I repeat again, it's not an active state, but rather a passive one, right? So we move on to basically the main part of this video, and why I'm going to be the verses that I'm going to be focusing on. So as I said, that the verse that I'm going to be focusing on is the verse in Surah Al-Fussilat. And in that way, Allah tells us that وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Right? So the Quranic definition of the word Muslim, the Muslim or Muslim within the Quran itself, is someone who surrenders their inclinations, those inclinations to bring harm to themselves and others. And they do so by aligning themselves with God's values. Okay, they align themselves with God's values. So when they say aslamtu lillah, I have surrendered to God, what that means is that I have aligned myself with those aspects of God that bring, with those aspects of God, right, with God's values, right? So I am in alignment again with God's values. So those values of peace, balance, and harmony within His creation, I am in alignment, right, with those values, and I've surrendered myself to God. Again, it is a passive state, not an active one. Okay, so when somebody says Aslamtu lillah, right, it's a passive state, it's not an active one. In order to again, in order to coexist with others in peace and without conflict. So basically, that is a Muslim. Again, Muslim is one who surrenders their inclinations to bring harm to themselves and others by aligning themselves with God's values. So they align themselves with God's values. Typically, of course, this word Muslim or Aslama is usually translated as to submit, which is fine. But of course, one has to, elaborate on what that means. The way the Quran puts it is not that I am basically being forced. It's not talking about a forceful submission or a forceful surrender. That's not what it's talking about. The best way to illustrate what the word Muslim means is actually imagining how, if you have if you have, like, if you dig like a hole or you dig a path through sand. Let's say, like, for example, you go to the beach, you dig maybe a hole, a very long hole, right, that goes into the sea, right? And then you pour water into the hole, and the water basically goes through that channel and goes into the sea, right? So basically, that what it's doing is Aslam, right? It's what it's doing, that water, what it's doing is Islam. It's basically, it's when you fit something so well that it just that it almost becomes it becomes you, or you become it, that you fit in it so well, and you're just doing it because it is so naturally, it naturally comes to you, so you just slide very calmly and peacefully into it. That is the meaning of surrender from the Quranic perspective. It's not a forceful surrender, because one needs to make that distinction. Because people, when they assume that God commands us to submit to Him, they see it as a form of being forced, right? Because we usually consider the act to submit, meaning that you're being forced to do it. But no, that's not the implication here. When you're using the word is Muslim, there is harmony and peace in the wording, because you are aligning yourself with the set of laws, the set of values that God has dictated for mankind to live, because you fit so well in those values. And when you put yourself in those values, like that water going through the channel, when you put yourself and you fix yourself in those values, they fit perfectly the human being, and they bring you peace, serenity, and tranquility. That is the surrender that is being talked about within the Quran. So going back to this verse, which is found in Surah Al-Fussilat, Allah says, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And who then is better in speech than one who invites to God and works suitably, and who says, I am indeed of the Muslimin, right? So you can, of course, switch the word Muslimin here with the upper definition that I've given you there. But let's continue. So to understand this, let's look at this from context, right? From the verses that actually come after what Allah is talking about. So we're going to be reading from verse number 33 to 36. And in those verses, Allah says, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ وَلَا تَسْتَوِي الْحَسَنَةُ وَلَا السَّيِّئَةُ ادْفَعْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا ذُو حَظٍّ عَظِيمٍ وَإِمَّا يَنزَغَنَّكَ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ نَزْغٌ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ إِنَّهُ هُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. And that roughly translates to, who then is better in speech than one who invites to God and works suitably, and who says, I am indeed of the Pacific. Notice what I have translated it as. I've translated it as Pacific. I haven't translated it as those who surrender or submitters or that, or in that case, but rather as I am indeed of the Pacific, right? And of course, according to Merriam-Webster, the dictionary, it defines the word Pacific as inclining to live in peace by lessening conflict, rejecting the use of force as an instrument of policy, having a soothing appearance or effect. These are the definitions, the primary definitions of the term Pacific, right? And as you can see, that this term here fits very perfectly with what we have been talking about regarding the definition of the word Muslim as far as the Quran and the raw definition is concerned. So again, I repeat that here it means I'm indeed of the Pacific. And you will understand why that term is actually Pacific here. It's not about being those who submit to God, in the sense that we understand it today, right? Like praise 5 times a day, fast. No, none of that stuff. This is a raw definition here. So it says, وَلَا تَسْتَوِي الْحَسَنَةُ وَلَا السَّيِّئَةُ. It says, for the good is not equal to the bad, right? So Allah is saying that the good is not equal to the sayyi'ah, to the bad. Then he says, idfa' billati hiya ahsan, repel using that which is better. So what Allah is saying is that um, the good thing is not equal to the bad thing. So idfa' billati hiya ahsan, you are to repel the evil with that which is better, right? So if somebody does an evil to you, Allah in this particular passage is saying that you are supposed to even do something that is better to that person who has done something bad to you. All right. So again, this is sort of like mirroring what we get from the Gospels. What is the very famous statement of Jesus? The golden rule, as they call it. Do unto others what you want to be done to you, basically, right? That you don't just you don't do good to those who do good to you, but you also do good to even those who do bad to you. idfa' billati hiya ahsan. That's what Allah says. Then he says that, for then the one between whom and thee there is animosity will become as if he was all along an ally, a confidant. So the person between whom and you there is animosity, there is hatred maybe, that or enmity, that person will become as if he has always been your ally and they have always been your confidant, your close friend. It will become as if they have always been your close friend from a long time ago. You won't even remember the moments when you used to be enemies. So the only way that you can turn somebody, you can turn an enemy into a friend, basically what Allah is saying is that you have to repel the bad with the good. When they do bad to you, you repel that with the good. Then Allah says, though it is not granted to other than those who are patient, right? It requires a lot of patience because usually the natural inclination is if somebody does bad to me, I do bad to them as well. I return evil with evil, right? That's the natural inclination, which is not, Allah is not saying that's a bad thing. No, it's saying that this aspect requires patience. You need to be patient in order to be able to pull this off, to do this act. Not all of us are able to do it. Most of us get angry and we want to retaliate with harm, right? But Allah is saying, وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا, that this is not given except to those who are patient, right? Then it says, وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا ذُو حَظٍّ عَظِيمٍ. It is not granted except to one possessing great fortune. You have to be extremely fortunate. And this is not talking about having money and that kind of and wealth. No. Fortunate here, it means that you've been blessed. You know, Allah has blessed you with being patient, with being calm, with being understanding. You know, that kind of calmness and peacefulness that you have about you, right? That when and not being stressed out, okay, and not overreacting when people do bad to you, right? That kind of state of being, that is ذو حظ. It's حظ عظيم, Allah calls it. It's a great fortune. Sometimes if you look at somebody who maybe a bully comes and pushes them, right? So they just let it go, they just let it slide and they just move on, right? And you look at that person and you would think that they are weak. No, actually, that is hadwin azim. Okay, that is hadwin azim. It's great fortune from that individual. It takes patience and self-restraint. Again, going back to the definition as I gave you of Muslim, one who, again, one who surrenders their inclinations to harm. It's not because this person doesn't want to retaliate, right? They can retaliate and they would want to retaliate, but they let their patience, right, and their mildness, they let that overcome them, right? And they don't retaliate. They return with something better, even. Okay. So again, so here Allah then tells us that وَإِمَّا يَنزَغَنَّكَ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ, if an encroachment from the Satan is to encroach thee, O Prophet, then seek thou refuge with God, as it truly is indeed He that is the hearing, the knowing. So here Allah is telling him that desire to react very suddenly and basically harm, that is very easily susceptible to shaitan. Shaitan can get in there and manipulate that feeling that you have inside you, and then you might do something that is absolutely wrong. Okay, it might lead you to do something that is wrong. So Allah is cautioning the Prophet that if there is an encroachment, let's say like somebody came to you and maybe they pushed you, a bully came to you and he pushed you, right? Allah would rather have that you are patient, right? Uh, the patience that you're supposed to exhibit in this particular case might the Satan might come into that and try to manipulate you and try to make you think that you're weak, or try to build up your anger, right? And just takes that anger and just multiplies it 100-fold so that you overreact. So Allah is saying in those particular moments, if the Satan does encroach thee with an encroachment, okay, shaitan does want to come to sneak up on you with some kind of bad feeling, that you're supposed to seek refuge with God. Fasta'idh billah, as Allah is hearing, knowing. Allah will hear you, right? He will hear you when you seek refuge with Him, and He knows, Allah knows, understands why you are seeking refuge with Him, and He understands the pain, He understands the difficulty that it takes for you to actually subdue that emotion within you and decide to do something that is better, right? So that is somewhat what a Muslim is. And I think that these verses perfectly illustrate what a Muslim is. Now, somebody, of course, might object with the following verses of the Quran, and they have the right to. Let's look at these verses. For example, right in the next chapter, right in the next surah, in Surah Ash-Shura, Allah then tells us at the end of the chapter in verses 36 to 43. In there, Allah gives us a list of certain individuals, those certain individuals whom Allah has considered of high resolve, right? Or not just of high resolve, but people of great fortune, people of good character. Okay, so it's basically about justice and retaliation. So here Allah says, فَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَمَتَاعُ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Whatever you have thus been given of anything, so anything that Allah has given you, فَمَتَاعُ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا, then it is valuable resource of the world. That is a resource, a utility, a matter for the world. Typically, this word would be translated as as enjoyment, but that's not just it. It mostly means a utility, something that you can use in this world. Then Allah says, وَمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. Whereas Whereas what is in the presence of God, وَمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى, it is better and longer lasting for those who are faithful and who upon their Lord they rely. So those people who the akhirah, Allah is saying that the akhirah that is with Allah will be better and longer lasting for those who are faithful to God and those who are and those who rely, who put their trust in God. Okay, who put their trust in God. Then it says, وَالَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ. Then we're given certain characteristics of these individuals for whom the akhirah will be better and longer lasting. Right? For those individuals, Allah gives us another characteristic. He says that وَالَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ. Those individuals, those who avoid the greatest of detriments, right? كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَالْفَوَاحِشَ, and indecencies. Okay, وَإِذَا مَا غَضِبُوا هُمْ يَغْفِرُونَ. And when they forgive, when they are angry, they forgive. Very important. When they are angry, they forgive. Right. So again, these are the people who will have a longer lasting and a better akhirah, whom Allah says they will have better. Then it says, وَالَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبِّهِمْ وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. That is, as well as those who respond to their Lord and who uphold the salah and whose decision making is by mutual consultation, and of whatever we have provided them, they spend. Again, very beautiful characteristics and qualities of these individuals. When we continue, وَجَزَاءُ سَيِّئَةٍ سَيِّئَةٌ, we move to the next one, which says, verse number 39, which says, وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَهُمُ الْبَغْيُ هُمْ يَنْتَصِرُونَ. So here, someone might object with this. Here Allah says, and those who, when transgression befalls them, they take revenge. Okay? You seek retaliation or you seek revenge when a transgression has been done on you. Now, someone might say, well, Rashid, you see here, Allah clearly says that that we are allowed to do that. I am not denying that. We are allowed to take revenge when somebody does a harm on us. Now, of course, this is talking about mostly at a political level, but it's also talking about at an individual level, as long as it's done through the correct channels. Here, so it says that those people who, when transgression befalls them, so somebody rebels against you or does something aggressive against you, that you take revenge. You take revenge in that moment. So let's say, for example, somebody comes and punches me, and then walks away. If I want to take revenge, I can either seek that through the proper channels by going to the police, blah blah, and all that, or I can punch him back in that moment. What is this verse is not talking about that you wait a couple of days, then you go to the person's house and you ransack his house, you beat him to almost to death. That's not what this verse is talking about at all. Okay, so I hope nobody gets the idea that that's what it's talking about. No, it's just talking about that in that moment, someone hits you one punch, you also punch him one punch. When they're bullying you, that's totally fine. Allah is not removing that right from you. Okay, He's not removing that right from you. You are entitled to it, but you should keep in mind that verse number 40. وَجَزَاءُ سَيِّئَةٍ سَيِّئَةٌ مِثْلُهَا. Though the penalty of an evil should be an evil equivalent to it. So you cannot do more than what was done to you. If somebody punches you, you punch them back once. If somebody, you don't punch them and then kick them and then slap them and then, no. Then you're going overboard. You're doing tughyan, you're going overboard, you're doing bagha. Then you have transgressed and rebelled against that individual. That is not allowed. Then Allah says, فَمَنْ عَفَى وَأَصْلَحَ فَأَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Okay, then Allah says, however, whosoever pardons and remedies, right, then his reward is upon God, as he truly does not like the wrongdoers. Right. So Allah is saying you that yes, it's true that the penalty of an evil is one equivalent to it. Right? That's Allah is not going to take away that right. The penalty of an evil is an evil equivalent to it. Okay, but the one who pardons, so if you decide to pardon in that particular case, wa aslaha, not only pardon, but you actually make amends, you rectify the situation. Okay, you make amends, you remedy the situation between you and that individual who wronged you. That is even greater. فَأَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Then his reward is upon Allah. إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الظَّالِمِينَ. Allah does not like the dhalimin. Okay, Allah does not like the wrongdoers. Now, why does Allah need to say this particular case? Allah is trying to remind you that it's not because Allah liked the one who did wrong, that's why you're forgiving them. That's not the point. That's not why Allah is allowing you to forgive and pardon. It's not because Allah is pleased or approves of what the wrongdoer did. No, Allah la yuhibbul zalimin. It's not because of that. It's only because Allah wants you to reach a higher level of being, wants you to reach a higher level of character than these other individuals. Okay? So then Allah repeats, and then Allah says, وَلَمَنْ انْتَصَرَ بَعْدَ ظُلْمِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَا عَلَيْهِمْ مِنْ سَبِيلٍ. That similarly, whoever takes revenge after having been wronged, then against such people should there not be any cause. Meaning that there's no cause for blame upon somebody who decides, you know what? Yes, I know Allah says that we are supposed to seek to forgive and or encourages overlooking and pardoning and then remedying and making amends. I realize that, however, I want my portion. That guy punched me. My ego is hurt. I want to punch him back too. Okay, so Allah is saying that if somebody decides to do that, okay, ma alayhim min sabil, there should not be any case against them, meaning that you as a Muslim, you cannot then come and belittle this person just because he thought he's right. You cannot make him feel bad because he thought he's right. He has the right to. Just because you would forgive just means that you are on a better character, you are on your better quality, but he is well within his right to seek revenge. That's fine. Then comes the next ayah, and we are on 42. Allah says, إنما السبيل على الذين يظلمون الناس ويبغون في الأرض بغير الحق أولئك لهم عذاب أليم. That cause for blame, the only ones who should be blamed should only be brought against those who wrong people and who rebel in the land without justification, right? That the only people that you should be blaming are those who go around wronging others and basically rebelling and transgressing the rights of other people without any just cause. Right? When they don't have the right to, they go around infringing on other people's basic rights. Those are the ones that you should be blaming, not this person who was transgressed against and then happened to seek his right. Okay, so don't harass him or criticize him or ridicule him just because he decided to go this other route of revenge rather than decide to overlook and forgive and pardon. So Allah says, "Ulaika lahum adabun alim." Allah says that upon those kinds of people who go around infringing on others and rebelling and causing transgression on others, violating other people's rights, for them in wait is what? A severe is lahum adabun alim. There is a painful torment. Then Allah says, "Walaman sabara wa ghafara inna dhalika lamin azmi al-umur." So Allah ends it. Allah wants you to understand this part. Yes, revenge is fine. Yes, and He tells you that forgiveness is fine. It's better. Then at the end, He repeats it again. He says, "But walaman sabara, whoever is, however, patient, wa ghafara, and they forgive, inna dhalik lamina azmil umur." That then it surely is of the most resolute of matters indeed. That is the highest character that you can reach. Okay, if you decide to be patient and you decide to forgive, that is the highest kind of level that you can reach with among the highest character trait that you can reach with Allah. Remember, even Allah tells the Prophet himself. He tells him in Surah Al-Ahqaf, at the end of the surah, after Allah has given him the stories of Ad and the story of Ad and at the end about the jinn. Finally, at the end, He says, "Fasbir kama sabara ulul azmi min ar-rusul." Right? Be patient like the patience of those of resolve among the messengers. So there were certain Rusul who were ulul azm, who had this resolve, meaning that they were a kind of people who would forgive a lot of transgression done against them. We understand, okay? That when people did bad to them, they wouldn't return evil. They wouldn't return bad, though they were justified in returning evil or revenge or retaliate. They didn't. They instead decided to be patient, and they instead decided to want to forgive. Now, who are some of those messengers? We know of some of them. We know Nuh. We know Isa. We know the Prophet himself. We know Yusuf did the same thing with his brothers. So these kinds of people, right? These kinds of individuals among the Rusul, among the messengers, those are the high caliber of messengers, the highest rank of messengers. Okay, ulul azmi min ar-rusul. And so Allah even tells the Prophet to be just as patient as them, right? And of course, among them is also Ayub. Allah talks about how patient he was, right? So again, to reiterate, we come back to the previous slide. In our definition of what a Muslim is Quranically, a Muslim is one who surrenders their inclinations to bring harm to themselves and others by aligning themselves with God's values. So they align themselves with God's norms and they don't incur harm onto other people, right? So in order to coexist with others in peace and without conflict. And the word that I chose for the word Muslim in this particular context of verses 33 to 36 of Surah Al-Fussilat is Pacific, which according to Merriam Dictionary is inclining to live in peace by lessening conflict, rejecting the use of force as an instrument of policy, having a soothing appearance or effect. That is the definition of a Muslim. The word Muslim is referring to the passive, the passive state of an individual. It's not the active state, it's the passive state. That's why in Surah Al-Hujurat, when the Prophet is, when Allah says, قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا, that the Bedouin Arabs, they say, آمَنَّا, we have Iman, we have Amana, right? Allah tells them to say, Allah commands the Prophet to tell them, قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا, you didn't actually get Iman. You didn't get Iman. وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا. What you should say is that أَسْلَمْنَا, we have أَسْلَمَ, right? We have Aslam. Meaning what? It's because Iman is the act, whereas Islam, it's passive. It's a passive state of being that you are in. It's not an active state. You're not doing anything. You're just staying peacefully and coexisting with those around you without doing harm to others. That's what Muslim is. The same thing with in Surah Al-Naml, when Sulaiman himself sends the letter to the Queen of Sheba, right? He sends the letter, "Innahu min Sulaiman wa innahu bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Allah ta'alu alayya wa atuni muslimin." The letter that Sulaiman sent to the Queen of Sheba stated that La ta'alu alayya, meaning don't rise up against me. Okay? Don't rise up against me. Wa'tuni muslimin, but come to me as Muslimin. The word Muslim there does not mean that that Sulaiman was commanding her to come as one who was following a particular religion that we know today as Islam, praise and praise the zakat and all that kind of stuff. No, the meaning there, Muslim, is that because if she did come to Sulaiman as a Muslim, why then later on, it was first later on that she actually said, wa aslamtu ma'a Sulaymana lillahi rabbil alamin, right? But before then, Sulaiman told her that, come, do not rise up against me, but come to me as Muslimin. Watuni Muslimin, meaning come to me as those who are pacific, those who who want to live in peace, who want to lessen conflict, and who reject the idea of using force as an instrument of policy, and those who are basically inclining to peace. That's basically what Suleiman told her. It wasn't that come to me accepting that that there's one God, there's one God and only him you should worship and all that. That's not what was meant by the term Muslim there. Similarly, in this particular example that we just went through, again, I'm going to read out the verses again. Here, Allah says, who then is better in speech than one who invites to God and works suitably or accordingly? And who says, I am indeed of the Pacific, those are the Muslimin. For the good is not equal to the bad. Repel using that which is better, right? For then the one between whom and thee is animosity will become as if he was all along an ally, a confidant, though it is not granted to other than those who are patient, and it is not granted except to one possessing great fortune. If an encroachment from the Satan is to encroach thee, O Prophet, then seek thou refuge with God, as it truly is indeed He that is the hearing, the knowing. Right? So that sums up my presentation for today. I hope that I was able to explain everything in as much detail and as well as I wanted. If anybody has any questions to ask, please do. If not, You can also come on and we can discuss the topic that we just discussed, or if you have any other questions that you want to ask, that's also fine. Let's see. Okay, we can see that there is nobody in the chat, which is totally fine. Nobody's gonna come on. All right. Well, I guess we don't have anybody who wants to come on. And also, there are no questions. Thank you very much for listening. Those who were able to listen. I know that this was a very an impromptu discussion again. But those who listened, thank you, and those who will listen later, thank you as well. I hope that you enjoy it. Do comment if you have anything to add, and make sure to subscribe and also share the video. Salamun Alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.